Hello, Husker fans. It's time for the three keys again. Three keys to Nebraska playing Purdue. We're in a big game week. Can you believe that? I didn't think that was going to happen, but it kind of is. Mostly because the Big Ten West isn't much of a division in terms of the competitive awesomeness, and because Nebraska's won 2 games in a row against, in my opinion, the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten East. Nebraska is now in a spot where they're playing Purdue. Each team is 2-1 in the Big Ten, and the winner of this game on Saturday night is kind of in the driver's seat, along with the winner of Minnesota-Illinois. So those two games are going to happen. The big game on Saturday is Michigan-Penn State, but these other 2 games in the West are going to go a long way to determining who wins the West. So it'll be really interesting to watch one at 11 a.m. We're going to be driving through Champaign as the game's going on, and then that one later in the evening between Nebraska and Purdue. That's the one that we're interested in here. Purdue is roughly a 2-touchdown favorite. 14 points, 13.5 points, depends on what sports book you go to. But the bottom line is, the odds makers think Purdue is going to win this game by 2 touchdowns. And there's reasons for that. One, Purdue's a pretty darn good football team. That's the team that I expected to actually win the Big Ten West, and I think they still will. To be honest with you, they've got the quarterback, they've got the skill players on offense, they added a couple of key transfers in the offseason, and they've got a good defense. They have a seasoned, experienced defense, a lot of juniors, a lot of seniors, a lot of guys that can make plays, a lot of guys that don't make a ton of mistakes. It's very similar to Nebraska's defense last year. And here's the other thing on Nebraska's side. If this were after the bye week, I think Nebraska might be in okay shape, but I think they're a little beat up, especially on defense. Luke Reimer and Quentin Newsom will be game-time decisions. They've got some issues on offense. It's kind of a makeshift offensive line. There's just questions on that side of the ball. Obviously, Nebraska struggled against Rutgers to score, struggled at times against Indiana as well. So we'll see how it all shakes out, but I don't love Nebraska's chances to win this game if it feels like the effort that it put into the Indiana and the Rutgers games is going to be enough. The second half performance at Rutgers might be what gets it there for Nebraska, but they're going to have to play really, really well for 4 quarters at Purdue, and that goes to our first key: quarters, dimes, and nickels. Nickels, dimes, quarters. So I want you to think about a football game in a little bit different way than maybe you have in the past. Okay, so you hear this stuff about Mickey Joseph talking about winning the 4th quarter. And of course, that's 15 minutes of a football game. By the way, about 15 minutes of a football game, a quarter of football, takes about 45 minutes of time. That's a long time. And a lot of times coaches will break it down into those 4 quadrants. I don't. I actually break it down into much smaller quadrants. Dimes, there's 6 of those during the game, right? There's 6 10-minute segments during the course of a 60-minute game. I like to go even a little deeper than that and go all the way down to nickels. All right. So how many nickels are there? Well, if there's 6 dimes, there's 12 nickels. And the way that I want you to kind of look about a game and think about it just a little bit is to take a game and divide it into 12 parts. That would be 5-minute parts in each quarter. The first 5, the middle 5, and the back 5. The first 5, the middle 5, and the back 5. There's 12 nickels over the course of a game, 12 of them. And what I want you to think about is how many of those nickels does Nebraska football win week in and week out? For example, Nebraska won the first nickel against Oklahoma. Remember, they were up 7-0. About 5 minutes into the game, they won that nickel. That nickel's on their side. Remember when W.C. Frank was open 120th and center? You probably don't, but I do. And you put the nickel in, right? And so you would play the games there. So think about a nickel. You put that nickel on Nebraska's side. But most of the nickels in that game were won by Oklahoma. They dominated much of the game. Against Rutgers. Rutgers, I would argue, won every single nickel in the first half against Nebraska. That would have been 6. And then Nebraska won all 6 in the second half. 6-6, Nebraska won by 1 point. I want you to think about how those things might work. And oftentimes, Nebraska needs to they got to win about 7 or 8 of the nickels in this game. They've got to control a whole chunk of this game. They're going to have to try to start fast and to finish fast, but remember how they do in those middle nickels of the game. So break it up, 5 minutes in each, the first, middle, and third 5 in each quarter. And just think to yourself, how many of these does Nebraska win? I'm going to say that Nebraska needs to win about 7 or 8 of them to win this game. And I think that controlling the game is going to be really important because I think Purdue's pretty explosive and Purdue can get on a roll. They can score a couple of touchdowns really fast. And so what you want to think about is how does Nebraska control this game and keep a lot of it on its side to withstand those moments where Purdue gets hot and they make a bunch of different plays. I think Purdue will have those kinds of moments in this game where they're able to put a couple of scores together. So Nebraska's got to find a way to control it. The quarters are important. The nickels are more important. You have to try to control a game over the course of a game, and you can't just wait till the fourth quarter, because if you're down by 4 scores or 3 scores, you're down 17 going into the fourth quarter, it's really, really hard to make all of that up. So think about that. Think about a different way to look at the game, nickels instead of quarters. See what you think. All right, second key, 5 good runs. 5 good runs in this game. What is a good run? Well, I'd say a good run is 10 to 12 yards, okay? Thereabouts. A great run is something over 20, and boy, if you get 5 of those, chances are you're running for 200 yards in the game. Because if you get 5 runs of 20, chances are you're getting some other things going, because defenses do not like to give up 5 runs of 20 yards or more. It's kind of a moral thing. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like in basketball. If you gave up 5 layups in a row, even though that'd be only worth 10 points, it's better than giving up 4 3-pointers. I don't know why, but it's just like it's a moral thing. It's a character thing. Same way with runs. If you can get 5 good runs in this game, 5 of 10 to 12 or more, it opens up so many other things, because defensive coordinators hate it when you rip off 10 to 12 yard runs. Boom, boom, boom. Doesn't mean that you're going to run for 200 yards, but let's say you get 5 good runs and maybe you carry the ball 25, 30 times. If you have 5 good runs in there, chances are you're going to be running for 140 or 150, and I think that would help Nebraska win the game. What does a good run look like? Well, Anthony Grant getting 3 or 4 of those. A good run would be a Casey Thompson scramble for 10 or 11 yards and a first down. A good run would be actually executing the Trey Palmer play, where he takes it on an end around or a jet sweep and it actually looks good. Get 5 of those. Purdue's run defense is really good. So we're not talking about playing, Northwestern, which wasn't a very good run defense, and Nebraska only had 1 good run in that game anyway. Purdue's got a really good run defense. If you can get 5 runs of 10 to 12 yards in that area, it's going to open up other things on the defense, because I do expect that Nebraska's going to be able to throw the ball at times against Purdue, but they need to have a decent run game that's consistent enough to get 5 good ones so that they can kind of open up some things in their passing game. So look for 5 carries of 10 to 12 yards. If they can get those, it'll open up things in the passing game. The last one, red zones and rub routes and red zone. Purdue has one of the best red zone offenses in the country. The last 2 teams that Nebraska played, Indiana and Rutgers, have the 12th and the 13th best offenses in the Big Ten. Okay, so that'd be the 3rd worst and the 2nd worst. And when we're talking about red zone offense, we're talking about touchdown percentage. Purdue's touchdown percentage is somewhere around 80% when they get in the red zone. Their overall scoring percentage is 96%. To be clear, the 2 teams that Nebraska just played aren't very good in the red zone. Indiana and Rutgers, they're not the kind of team that once they get inside the 20, they're going to do a lot of damage. Now, Indiana was able to score twice once it got inside the red zone, but remember what Rutgers did. Rutgers really struggled when it got into Nebraska territory. They were not able to finish off those drives, even when they had the big play. And so Purdue is different. Purdue is a team that can score really efficiently once they get inside the opponent's 20-yard line, and here's how they do it. They do a great job of creating space on their routes. And a rub route is essentially where one offensive player is sort of running his route, but he's rubbing up against a defender who's covering a different offensive player. Sometimes they call that a pick, and it's offensive pass interference. More often than not, it's kind of like holding, where you could probably call it 17 times in a row, but the official will only call it once or twice. And that's why teams do it all the time, because they assume, well, they're going to play the odds. If we do this 17 times and they only call it twice and it works 9 other times, well, shoot, let's do it. And that's exactly what Purdue will do. They've done a really good job against Nebraska in recent years of getting running backs, right, that are right next to the quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, and getting them out on the kind of on a wheel route or on a flat route, and a receiver's coming across, and they sort of knock off the linebacker that might be covering them. They do a nice job of hiding some of their H-backs and tight ends in the backfield and then getting those guys out, and all of a sudden, and it happens really fast too. So Nebraska's kind of have to switch defenders at times, probably do a matchup zone, something of that nature. It's not easy to stop. That's why Purdue scores a lot, but Nebraska's going to have to find a way to switch off guys and find a way to stop those plays. And when you get Purdue in open space, you have to tackle. And Nebraska has not been great at open field tackling, but this will be a game where they get tested in that way. It'll be really challenging. So when Purdue gets in the red zone, you got to hold them to field goals. And I know that sounds like an obvious thing, which is why we add the rub route piece. You've got to find a way to slow that particular kind of play down. Otherwise, I think Purdue's going to have a field day. Honestly, Purdue's a good team, and I think this is probably the best overall team that Jeff Brom's had. Maybe last year's team that won 9 games was pretty darn good too, and I think this one's just about as good. Nebraska, obviously in flux. There's still a lot of things changing. I think they're a little banged up. I think this is going to be a tough one for the Huskers to win. If they pull this one off, and they can do it by getting a couple of turnovers or doing the things that I talked about, then hold on. It's going to be one heck of a bye week, because if Nebraska wins this game and it remains in first place in the Big Ten West, the momentum that it can gain, not only for Mickey Joseph as the potential head coach, but for the team in general, could be incredible. Watch that Illinois-Minnesota game, because those are the next 2 teams that Nebraska will be playing. But if Huskers are victorious in West Lafayette on Saturday night, shoot, you might even have to say that Minnesota and Illinois got something to watch out for, and that Nebraska might be the Big Ten West favorite. Can you believe that? Can you believe we were just talking 4 weeks ago about a coach getting fired? If Nebraska wins on Saturday night, everything about this season changes. Okay, Husker fans, I'm Sam McKewon. Thanks for listening along to the 3 Keys.